A monster machine in Ukraine, seemingly high-tech, yet left to rust in a giant hangar.
And you see a wing structure, part of a fuselage, and then looming over all of it is this absolutely enormous aircraft.
A ghostly facility sprawling across northern Indiana, displaying strange features.
So we've got slides coming out of these buildings, and those are not there for fun.
A forest of derelict towers in Greece with mythical origins.
It's a dramatic sight, a collection of ruined towers perched on a hill with the coastline stretching out in the distance.
And a collection of ruined constructions strategically perched on the edge of a Scottish loch.
This is such a peaceful location. But these concrete structures, they evoke a time when this loch was transformed into an area of action and frantic activity.
Decaying relics, ruins of lost worlds, forged through years of toil, now haunted by the past. Their secrets waiting to be revealed. Ukraine, Eastern Europe. On the outskirts of the capital of Kiev sits a vast, featureless structure that hides an extraordinary secret.
We're in a kind of industrial suburb, and you come into this very abandoned, derelict area with weeds growing through the pavement. On the edge of this thing, you see this one enormous building.
The first thing that strikes you is that it has these massive, massive doors, over 100 feet high. So whatever this building's intended for was clearly some kind of supersized structure.
When you see anything that's unusual or just beyond your normal expectation in scale, you're drawn to it. You want to know what lies behind those doors.
Inside, old machinery that lines the cavernous interior provides a clue as to what was manufactured within.
It's kind of like a crypt for ancient aircraft, in pieces mostly. You see different parts laying around that haven't been connected yet.
Dwarfing the aircraft stored there is one massive fuselage of an aeroplane. It is huge. It towers above everything else, and it dominates the space.
We know that there's a link between this mammoth aircraft and the Cold War, but just looking at the plane, the link isn't clear.
What's the story behind this? Why did it get so far on such a massive scale and then not complete the job?
Inside this giant hangar lies an impressive feat of aviation history. That was once at the heart of a fierce international rivalry between two superpowers. Hennady Silchenko has worked for the Antonov Design Bureau for nearly 4 decades. He was part of the team responsible for this plane's development.
As to where we are now, I can say that we are standing in one of the warehouses of our company, which is used for conservation and storage.
Antonov are a huge Ukrainian aeronautical company. They were known for making big aeroplanes. That was their thing.
And it's the sheer scale of the parts that are key to understanding its origin. At 84 meters in length, it is over 11 meters longer than the world's biggest passenger plane flying today.
The famous A380, the supersized passenger jet from Airbus, isn't even as large. Clearly, this aircraft was designed for some extraordinary purpose, something extremely large and heavy.
Продолжаю. Задачи самолета состояли в том, чтобы была возможность перевозить на тот момент огромные веса, до 250 тонн.
Born at a time when East and West were locked in bitter struggle, this flying fortress was to have a special role to play.
When we think about the Cold War, we think about the potential for military conflict between the US and the USSR. We think about nuclear weapons and the buildup of that capability. But the Cold War also took place in all these other arenas.
There was a battle of propaganda to be won as well, and space became the place to fight that one out. And the space race took engineering and creativity to a whole new level.
So in 1972, the United States announces the Space Shuttle program. And the Soviets see this as alarming. First of all, it's a huge leap in this prestigious space race. The Americans are going to have a new generation of technology the Soviets don't have.
The Soviets were on the back foot, but they could see that the shuttle program was the future of space exploration, and this plane is part of that story.
This is the Antonov AN-225, the world's largest model of aircraft. But how was a giant plane supposed to help the USSR achieve its goal of conquering space?
As soon as the US announced the shuttle program, the Soviets decided they were going to have to come back with their own program called the Buran.
Geographically, the USSR is a huge, huge space with lots of centers of engineering excellence. Now, the Space Shuttle program requires huge pieces of technology, very big scale engineering, and to get them into one place, fit for launching, you'd need to transport everything to that location.
So the Soviet solution is to fly the space shuttle to the Cosmodrome in southern Kazakhstan. And yet, there is no aircraft big enough to carry a space shuttle.
Постройка, изготовление и самолета, который бы смог решить
The
эти
engineers
задачи,
knew that the construction of an aircraft that could solve those issues would, without doubt, elevate the aviation industry of not only a Soviet state, but of the entire world.
всю авиацию мировую совершенно на другие высоты, на другие задачи.
With an epic challenge ahead of them, the Antonov team got to work. Just 3 years after the idea for this model of aircraft was conceived, the monstrous AN-225 finally took to the skies, with a shuttle on its back.
One of the challenges of carrying a space shuttle on top of an aircraft is that it really disrupts the airflow. So in the design of the Antonov 225, they split the tail into 2 pieces so that the vertical stabilizers were outside of that turbulent zone.
And when it took off, it was not only a shock for the whole world, but to some extent, even for us, its creators. Such a plane in the air is still fantastic to witness.
And it was striking because in 1989, to kind of announce this great technological breakthrough to the world, they send the AN-225 to the Paris Air Show. And everybody who sees it is just blown away by the sheer scale of this aircraft.
With the AN-225 declared a resounding success, the Soviet Union forged ahead with plans to assemble 3 more. This was meant to be number 2 off the production line.
Forget about just being an engineering marvel. For the Soviets, this was a massive propaganda coup.
Although in the end, it really turned out to be too little, too late.
A storm was brewing that would spell disaster for the world's biggest aircraft.
A couple of years later, the Soviet Union collapsed and everything changed.
There was really no purpose for the plane. It got mothballed. The other models that were under construction never got completed.
Without the space race, without that competition with the USA, why did the world need a plane on that scale? That's what nobody could figure out.
Yet that wasn't the end of its story. Pilot Dmytro Antonov is one of the few men to have flown this winged Leviathan.
AN-225 was brought back to life in 2001. It started to fly again. And since that time, it has performed numerous humanitarian missions.
But with the plane costing over £24,000 an hour to charter, it's rarely called into action. When it does make an appearance, it attracts quite a crowd.
When we went to Australia, for instance, we were met by more than 15,000 people. And when you realise that all of them just came to see us, to see the plane, it makes us feel proud. We are proud to be flying it.
What puts this on the must-see list is that it actually holds 240 world records, including carrying the world's heaviest commercial cargo and the world's heaviest single object.
Today, this incomplete chapter in aviation history may lie in pieces, but Antonov have not given up hope of one day seeing it take to the skies.
Unlike the first aircraft, this one is unfinished. However, we are still proud of it. Of course, we really want to finish it. We have the means to do so. The only thing we need is a customer who would buy it, and then we would start work on it straight away.
And it's getting another look by powers like China as a possible entree into the space race for themselves. So, you know, potentially there is still even a bright future.
On a remote coast in Scotland, a cluster of ruins emerge out of a wild landscape.
On the fringes of the Northwest Highlands, on the tip of Scotland, you're totally exposed to the full force of the North Atlantic.
We've got a rocky, rugged coastline, and we've got concrete fortifications built right into the rocks.
You can see that this is a defended location.
Some look like lookout posts, others more like pillboxes or gun emplacements. It becomes ever clearer that this was the scene of a major military enterprise.
We have to wonder, what is so important here in this quiet rural area that needs to be defended like this?
This was the setting for a daring operation, yet mystery still swirls around this site.
The impact of the war has left its mark, and it's a story that, due to the Secrecy Act, isn't entirely well understood.
The origins of this secret site are intrinsically tied to a remarkable story of perseverance and sacrifice.
When we look at the way these reinforced concrete emplacements are designed and built, it's very clearly mid-20th century. It's Second World War era stuff. And yet, when we think about Second World War in the British Isles, we think about defending London from a Nazi invasion.
Were the Allies expecting Hitler to mount a UK attack from the north? Or is there another reason for fortifying so heavily this remote region of the British Isles?
This is a part of Scotland that was facing away from the Nazis. Why would we build fortifications that face away from the threat?
This area has a sparse population. Yet for one of them, Nicky Ellerkirk, this military site has always held an allure.
My childhood was spent playing around these bunkers. It's a rather unique kids' playground made up of, 70-year-old rusting lumps of concrete.
Yet there was a time when this was a hive of activity.
We're up here in a tiny fishing and crofting community, and there was this sudden influx of 3,000 troops who landed from everywhere, India, Poland, Britain, other overseas territories.
Why were troops flooding into this desolate area? Various remnants of military hardware provide clues. Francis Russell has been researching the site for over a decade.
And here we have one of the 6-inch gun emplacements. There were 2 6-inch guns here, and then further around the corner, another 2 6-inch guns. They were a deterrent, and they look mean.
Beneath these guns, a minefield ran across the mouth of the loch. And behind that, another line of defense.
We've got submarine boom netting, which is large rings of wire, all woven together like chainmail. That was hung between surface floats and huge chunks of concrete on the seabed.
As well as protecting against U-boats, lookout towers warned of incoming aircraft or naval attacks.
It's hard to imagine now, but this was once a hive of activity. Hundreds of ships and thousands of men, all crammed into this small area.
This is Loch U, a sea lock used as a secret assembly point in the Second World War. Its need was driven by the German invasion of the Soviet Union.
When the Germans attack Russia on June 22nd, 1941, they sweep initially almost literally to the gates of Moscow. And first Britain, and then once America enters the war, America promise aid to Russia.
These vital supplies had to be transported by sea to Russia from a suitable base, and it had to remain secret.
People often ask, why Loch U? And the answer is quite simple. It was at the extreme range for German bombers at the beginning of the war. It's got a narrow entrance, which makes it easier to protect. It's deep, up to 240 feet, and it's wide, and it's a safe anchorage.
Loch U is a different kind of loch. It's a narrow inlet of the sea. It's salt water, it is exposed to the elements, but it's a really clever place to tuck away a big naval operation until you're ready to let it loose on the world.
By February 1942, Loch U was fully operational as a base for the Arctic convoys, with its first convoy sailing that same month. Merchant ships carried the supplies and were escorted by ships of the Royal Navy and the Canadian and US Navies.
The Arctic Convoy is one of the biggest examples of cooperation during the war. It was a combined operation of 14 different nations, ranging all the way from India through Panama, the Netherlands, the UK, Canada, the US, the list goes on. Men would have been drafted from all of these various places and put on ships and sent up to Loch U.
These men would have little idea of their ultimate destination, but all feared the dreaded Arctic run.
Often the first clue they'd have that they were heading out round the north instead of back down to the south would be the ships would be loaded with cold weather gear. Cold weather gear consists of a sturdy coat, not much to protect you against the ice and hail and freezing waves.
The route for transporting supplies to Russia was a highly treacherous one.
The best route, the fastest and most efficient route to get war material to Russia was through the ice-free northern ports, and that's Murmansk and Archangel, and that is going this northern route.
Ships on the Murmansk run had to worry about the Nazis. They had to worry about U-boats, destroyers, battle cruisers operating out of Norway, Nazi planes flying out of Norway.
Then had to navigate the perils of the icy Arctic water, fog that camouflaged icebergs, and snowstorms raging across their bows.
Many were young boys who would have volunteered, some as young as 16. The merchant seamen never signed up for war, and here they find themselves amidst ice, storms, gales, and the constant threat of the enemy.
Could they successfully arm the Soviets against the biggest land invasion in human history? And would Lock U manage to stay under the Nazi radar?
Ships that arrived in Lock U had to pass an examination vessel, and then once through the boom net, which was for protecting against enemy subs, they were allocated a place to anchor.
We had to have lots of buildings to accommodate sailors and to accommodate the dockyard technicians who would do all the work of refueling, resupplying, and repairing ships.
But the key was to avoid alerting the Nazis to their presence.
You want to have radio silence because your enemy will have direction finders. So you want to have prominent signal posts so you can use light signals, signal flags to communicate throughout the fleet through visual signals and not use the radio. Your best defense is secrecy.
A total of 19 convoys made up of 481 merchant ships and over 100 naval escort vessels left Lock U for Russia during World War II. Part of a highly effective convoy system.
What is amazing, though, is that despite German attacks, only 7% of the ships and convoy traffic through northern Russia will be lost.
This vast volume of materials and weapons flowing into Russia helped the Soviets fend off Hitler's massive invasion force.
The boots that they wore in Russia were made in America. The Jeeps that they drove in Russia were made in America. Because we, the Western Allies, were able to ship so much stuff to the Soviet Union, the Soviets were able to keep on fighting. And without the Russians defeating the Nazis from the east, we all would not have been able to defeat the Nazis.
After April 1945, Lock U became a marshalling point for many of the German U-boats that had surrendered while still at sea.
Yet this success still came at great cost.
3,000 or so brave young men went up north and died on what Winston Churchill called the worst journey in the world. Lock U is a monument to the way that people came together. The Russians, the Americans, the British, Canadians, all came together to defeat the Nazis.
Today, the Russian Arctic Convoy Museum works to ensure these stories of bravery live on, along with these concrete remains.
They need to be preserved to let people know that sacrifices were made.
In the open countryside of North Indiana lies a sprawling network of overgrown structures that hide a secret past.
This is a complex that covers thousands of acres, and what you see are clusters of buildings, widely separated.
Some of them festooned with undergrowth and trees. Some of them look almost like tree houses.
When you get up close, you can see that the buildings are strangely segmented. with large walls covering each segment.
This looks like a place that people forgot about entirely. Did something desperate happen to warn people to stay away?
The scale of the site suggests this place was once of paramount importance. But it's the distinctive layout and design of the buildings that offer the clues as to why.
What you're looking at is something that is certainly organized not for efficiency, but for safety factors.
What could be so important, but also so dangerous?
Overgrown and abandoned today, this place was once filled with workers. Amongst them in the 1950s was Fern Eddy Schultz, who was employed here as a secretary. Much of the work she did was highly confidential.
The saying here was, what you see here and what you hear here, you let it stay here. We weren't at liberty to go out and tell anybody a lot of the things that we saw go on.
It's no accident that this site was built out here in rural Indiana. But secrecy wasn't the only reason.
If you're going to build a factory to make Jeeps, you'll do it in Detroit because that's where the workforce is, that's where the facilities are. If you're going to build things that go bang, you don't want to do it in the middle of a city.
Hidden in the woods are clues to what this place was.
Look at the way escape slides have been located around the place. Those are not there for fun. This is not a playground.
The chutes were for the safety of the employees in the event there was what we call a blow.
This was the Kingsbury Ordnance plant, a vast ammunition manufacturing site. On the 7th of December 1941, Japan attacked the naval base at Pearl Harbor, and the US soon entered the Second World War. Sites like this were desperately needed, but getting a place like Kingsbury built and up to speed would take months, if not years.
To successfully fight a major war in Europe and the Pacific, you needed ammunition.
The US government goes to a place in Indiana that's right on the railway. It's near the coal and steel output of the Midwest and Pittsburgh. It's built on 13,500 acres of farmland. This site is huge.
And you've got these very widely spaced factories so that if there is a disaster in one area, it won't set off all the others in a chain reaction.
The site also included ammunition storage, barracks, laboratories, offices, and testing facilities, all linked together by miles of rail tracks. Fern remembers her time working here years later during the 1950s. The systems, however, were much the same.
We're on the one line, and on the one line they made what we call fuses and boosters. The fuses were part of something that set the ammunition off when it was fired. The booster boosted the capacity of the fuse. The final product on the 2 line was the 20-millimeter shell, and on the 3 line was the 30-millimeter, and so on down the line to the 5 line.
Separating the facilities wasn't the only safety measure taken, because the work being carried out inside these buildings also dictated how they were built.
The main thing that they're producing here is smokeless powder. And it's a process uses a lot of different acids. It's a very dangerous process to do.
You see, the interior walls are really solid, and then the exterior walls and the roofs are relatively thinly built of light steel, glass, plastic, and that's so that if there's an accident, the interior wall will be so strong that it will direct the blast toward the weaker areas away from the very valuable machinery, and also the manpower.
But with the US suddenly embroiled in war in the Pacific and in Europe, how would such a vast site be made ready in time? In December 1941, the US entered the Second World War. While the attack on Pearl Harbor had come as a sudden, tragic surprise, the military had been preparing to enter the war for some time, and sites like the Kingsbury Ordnance plant had actually been operational for months.
You see, the story begins long before the Americans go to war in Pearl Harbor. The United States, although not willing to actively jump into World War II, saw the danger of a possible Nazi victory and began a massive rearmament program.
As early as the summer of 1941, Kingsbury had been shipping out munitions to Europe to aid the Allies. From here, its importance would only increase.
This place, Kingsbury Ordnance Plant, was an absolutely critical piece of the US war machine in World War II.
At its height, in a single day, Kingsbury produced 180,000 point-detonating fuses, over 46,000 40mm shells, and 500,000 rounds of 20mm ammunition. But to achieve this staggering output level, it needed workers, something that was hard to find in rural Indiana.
They purpose-built a neighborhood here, Kingsford Heights, to house people because there was nobody here.
In all, close to 21,000 people worked at the site. In amongst them were a great number of women, both breaking down old social conventions and doing their part for the war effort.
They are working full shifts, double shifts in factories. And that changes not only the way others see them, but it changes the way they see themselves.
But despite the progress, the workforce faced numerous dangers and ailments that could last a lifetime.
People are being exposed to toxic chemicals. People are getting burns from flammables. And in some cases, people are displaying really worrying symptoms.
Employees were forced to wear these powder suits. They had to remove all jewelry, anything that might cause static electricity, any kind of friction that could create a spark that would set off some kind of a conflagration inside the munitions plant or any of its buildings.
In the powder blending areas, people actually turned orange from handling the material.
When the Second World War ended, the plant went into standby before being called back into action for the Korean War. Finally, in 1960, it closed for good. Today, it's a shadow of its former self. But in its prime, the Kingsbury Ordnance Plant and those who worked here were a valuable part of the defense of America.
I think that was the feeling of most all of us that worked here, that we were all part of the war effort, and we're doing our share. We're very proud to be making something that was helping our country be free.
In southern Greece is a barren land that time forgot. In what's known as the Deep Mani, a craggy headland juts out into the Mediterranean Sea.
This is an inhospitable landscape, and even today, few tourists actually venture this far south.
Near the end of this dramatic peninsula, in what appears almost like mountainous desert, you catch a glimpse of these ruins.
You have the perfect vantage looking out to sea and down the coast. These towers look almost military rather than civilian.
They kind of blend into the landscape, but they are defensive, they are proud, and they are there to be seen.
These constructions have become synonymous with the Maniots, a great warrior people still revered by Greeks today.
Part of the mystery of the area to me is, well, who were these warfaring Maniots? You know, where did they come from?
Some believe they descend from the Spartans, and thus they have this kind of mythical invincibility in Greek culture.
Over the centuries, the Maniots developed a reputation as fearsome fighters.
How did they garner this reputation? And how do these now battered towers fit into that story? Local guide and author Matthew Dean has been exploring these castle-like structures for over 30 years.
You just have to walk around these ruined towers and imagine, what was it like 100 years ago, 200 years ago? It's a place for those who like using their imagination rather than seeing something directly for what it is now. So if we look at the towers themselves, the first thing that strikes you is just how tall they are. 3 or 4 stories high. Why? Defense. From there, you get a great view over potential threats arriving by sea.
The towers are narrow, they've got tiny windows, and on top there are turrets, and there are also places where you could put weapons.
So when designing your bespoke war tower, you had a number of choices. Sometimes they'd build just a war tower on its own, which was only ever used in times of war. Or to make life a bit easier, you'd add on a more open, easier to live in space for times of peace. And then when the threat comes, you retreat into the tower for as long as necessary.
In the 15th century, Greeks came to this remote Mani Peninsula, fleeing the area around Sparta when it was taken by the Ottoman Turks. The new inhabitants, who became known as the Maniots, developed a certain notoriety and would inspire a revolution. But in the meantime, survival was everything.
Their number one concern was defense. Both defense against foreign invaders coming by sea, whether it was Venetians or Turks, but also due to the lack of resources in this very infertile area, it was to defend your own family against your neighbor. You had to fight your neighbor literally to survive.
Ritualized vendettas between families could last for months, even years.
So feuding became a fairly regular part of life for the Maniots living down here. An English colonel in 1805 noted that over the last 40 years, 100 of Vathia's men had been killed in an ongoing feud between 2 families.
To lose 100 men out of a total population of 300 is a huge amount, and that gives you an idea of how bitter the feuds were in this area.
And so you and your clan needed to defend your plot against others with equal ambitions, whether Turks, Venetians, pirates, or neighboring clans. The method of defense? To build a tower. These are the Mani Towers of Vathia. The design of the towers played a crucial role in protection from your enemies.
Not only did these stone skyscrapers give you a good vantage point to view any potential aggressors on the horizon, they also gave you a high vantage point to defend for potential ground attackers. Small windows, easy to shoot down on your enemy. Even better if you block them up, leaving just a tiny hole for the muskets. And small doorways are much harder to breach.
Construction of the towers increased in the late 18th century as the Turkish threat intensified. And the Maniots bitterly resisted the Ottoman Turks, who now controlled the rest of Greece.
The fighting between the Turks and the Maniots was particularly vicious. If a Maniot went down in battle and was injured, a fellow soldier would take him, kiss him on the forehead, and then lop off his head. It was better to die at the hand of your fellow man than to fall into the Turks' hands.
Into the early 1800s, a revolution was brewing. This was the moment when the Maniots would seal their reputation as great warriors.
The war for independence started down here in the Mani. Significant clansmen gathered their troops together, hooked up with other clansmen, and together they all marched to meet up with Kolokotronis, who all Greeks regard as the father of the revolution.
Throughout Greece, there developed the slogan, freedom or victory, whereas the Manny's version, it was a little different, death or victory. And this sums up the difference with the Maniots. They always consider themselves free and independent and never subject to Ottoman rule.
By 1826, Ottoman soldiers renewed their offensive in the Mani Peninsula. 7,000 men were forced to retreat by the fierce Maniots attacking from their towers. Greek independence was finally secured in 1830, and the Mani's resistance of the Turks has never been forgotten.
This is the only part of Greece that never fell to the Turks, that never became part of the Ottoman Empire.
The pride that the Greeks feel for this area comes from their determination not to be conquered by the Ottoman Empire. The rest of Greece fell, including Crete behind us, but the Mani remained independent.
The Mani have been making their homes in towers for not decades, but hundreds of years. And the towers evolved over time, starting off very small, very military, a statement of power to external enemies. But over time, they become slightly more domestic, but still with that structure, that power.
Over time, the inhabitants emigrated to major cities, with many heading to Western Europe, Australia, and the United States.
The fact that these towers were orientated towards war and defense means that they just don't have a place in the modern world. So they remain largely blocked up and left gradually crumbling away.
I think it's important that the Vathia remains preserved because it's a very clear indication of past times where life was difficult, life was violent, and yet within such dire circumstances, there was still a fierce pride and almost a sense of nobility of being a member of that society.
Now they are abandoned, crumbling ruins. Many remind us of dark times, but some were once beacons of hope and progress, lasting testimonies to human imagination, enterprise, and spirit.